Hi, everyone. This is the 50 States Highpointing podcast and YouTube channel. What started off as a project for a communications class has turned into something that I actually love doing. I have the privilege of providing the platform for people to talk about the extraordinary things they do in the outdoors. Highpointing is the challenge of reaching the highest elevation in each of the 50 states. Highpointers don't get paid for their hobby. No one is sponsored by an outdoor company, and people fit this challenge into their everyday lives that also include careers and family. I found through these interviews that people who attempt this challenge are incredible and genuinely enjoy talking about their experiences. If you consider yourself a Highpointer and you want to share your story on this podcast or interview, please send me an email at 50stateshighpointingpodcast@gmail.com. It has been a pleasure speaking with every Highpointer. I hope you enjoy. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 50 States Highpointing podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and the Highpointers that we're speaking with today are Austin and Nicole, calling from South Carolina. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So Austin and Nicole have a really interesting story, and I can't wait to get into it. They are calling from South Carolina, as that is their temporary home, but they're going to tell us all about their adventures on the road and their highpointing that they've done along the way. So you can find them on Instagram at Where They Beignet, and I will also put that in the show notes to the podcast and on the YouTube channel. So let's get started. Austin, Nicole, can you guys tell us how you got into highpointing?
Sure. So I got out of the Marines in the end of 2016, and I moved to Denver. And throughout 2017, 2018, I was doing the 14ers in Colorado, which are all the peaks in Colorado that are above 14,000 feet. Mm-hmm. And while I was there, I did a dozen of them. I did 3 in the wintertime, just really tried to knock out as many as I could. And one of those happened to be Mount Elbert, which is the highest peak in Colorado. And so I had done the high point in Colorado, and that was in 2019. And then in 2020, I was a part of Veterans Expeditions, which is a nonprofit group that takes veterans from all branches out and does a variety of outdoor activities with them. But that specific year in August, their trip was Kings Peak, which is in Utah. And it's also the high point of Utah. So I flew from Denver to Utah to Salt Lake City and met up with a few other veterans. And we did a 30-mile round trip, backpacking trip through the high Uintas wilderness. And that's where it's awesome. And that's where I summited Kings Peak. And so that was my second official high point. And that's actually where I met some other people who were high pointing. And they told me what they were doing. There were 3 younger folks from Tennessee. And they told me, hey, we're flying to all these different places around the United States. We're climbing the highest peaks in these states. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I've already done 2 of them now. Yeah. And so that's kind of like where I first heard about it. And then the next year, so this would have been 2021, I scheduled a trip with 3 Marine buddies of mine to climb Mount Shasta in Northern California and then Mount Hood in Oregon. And Mount Hood is the tallest peak in Oregon. Unfortunately, we had to actually switch plans last second with Shasta because there was too much of a rockfall danger. It was a exceptionally warm season. And so we ended up doing Mount Adams up in Washington instead. And we successfully summited Hood, the 4 of us. And that was my third high point. And so I had 3 done just on my own time. And then Nicole and I began our adventures in the van together. And we decided together that wherever we drove in the van, if we were anywhere near state high point, we were going to do our best to tackle it, whether it was her or me or both of us together. Whichever state we went to, we were going to try to do the high point.
That is so cool. So how long have you been in the van?
We were in the van for, was it 15 months?
15 months?
Yeah.
Okay.
just
Wow.
traveling around the country. Yeah.
So where did the van start?
Um, well, got built in Denver, and
Okay.
then we went and visited a friend down in Mobile,
Mhm.
Alabama, and that's kind of where we were working out all the kinks. So technically, our full-time van travel started in like Louisiana, and we've pretty much made a whole loop around the US. So we came over, did the South, and came up pretty much the eastern seaboard all the way up to Maine, and then
Oh,
all the way up, and then
okay.
through New York, all New England and New York, and then down back to the Midwest to visit our families, and then like north, and then over, and just back down along the coast, and
The whole southern
Wow.
the
border.
whole southern border,
Yeah.
and now we're back
Yeah.
in China.
So you've made
Yeah,
a full circle.
Full
made a full
circle.
circle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
15 months later, we did a full circle.
yeah.
Wow. So can you talk about some of the high points that you've done along the way, starting in Alabama?
Sure. Yeah. That would have been our first one as Cheaha Mountain
Hmm.
in Alabama. We hiked that one after we had driven by the high point in Florida,
Oh
and
yeah.
we totally forgot to go. Uh, so we missed the first opportunity, which was Britton Hill in Florida. So we will have to go back for that.
Wait, you
So
drove by it, you just didn't get out of the car?
Yeah.
we
It
drove.
can
We drove.
happen,
We weren't that close.
We were
Oh,
like
okay.
maybe 30, 40 minutes away, but this was before
Oh,
we had officially decided we were
yeah.
gonna do the high points. Um,
Okay. I thought it
so
was like you drove by and you could see it out the window, but you just
we,
didn't get out of the car. I was like, I mean, you basically
we,
did it. Okay.
Yeah.
we weren't sure we were gonna high point at that point, and so
Okay.
we ended up heading north. We did Alabama's, and then we went over to Mississippi. We did Woodall Mountain over there, and then we headed back east over to Georgia, and we did Brasstown Bald, which is the high point of Georgia. And
Hmm.
then from there, we ended up just, like she said, going up the eastern seaboard, knocking out any of the state high points that we could get to, all the way through New England. And then we did not do Katahdin because we have two dogs that live with us in the van.
Okay.
And Baxter State Park, I believe they do not allow dogs in Baxter State
Oh.
Park there.
Yeah.
So we had to put that one aside, but we did knock out Mount Washington in New Hampshire. We did Mount Mansfield in
Hmm.
Vermont. And then we were going to do Mount Marcy in New York. And we had a 2 day window set aside for it, but the weather was awful. It was just
Oh,
thunderstorm after thunderstorm. And we waited and waited. And then we said, okay, we'll do it some other time.
sure.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite high point in the South?
Probably, I don't know, Brasstown Bowl, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably the
Yeah.
one with the best view.
Oh, okay.
Brasstown Bald,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
panoramic 360
Yeah,
view.
that was cool.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like for me it was Guadalupe Peak in Texas.
Oh,
I'm
sure.
if we call that as the southern one,
Hmm.
just because it's such a high elevation, it's above 8,000 feet, and you can see all the gypsum salt flats around it because there's so
Wow.
much prominence there on Guadalupe Peak. So
Hmm.
that's probably my favorite, I'd say.
Yeah. If we're doing the whole
Okay.
South, yeah.
Yeah.
What about along the East Coast?
My favorite out here was Mansfield in Vermont.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Um, I just thought the hike was super cool because we went from the bottom, we didn't drive up,
Hmm.
and dogs were allowed, so we all got to go together.
Oh,
And
fun.
yeah, it was cool. I mean, it's a long, hard hike. Not the
Okay.
hardest, but it was challenging. And I don't know, on the way up, there's just so many opportunities just to look out and look into the valley and to see the
Yeah.
layers of the mountains. And it was gorgeous. And then getting up to the top where there's the alpine tundra, like that's the last little
Hmm.
bit of it. So to see that was really cool. And it was just really cool to look into both valleys from the top. Um,
Wow.
We were up there on a beautiful day. It was just partly cloudy, so there were like sun rays coming down, and the layers were gorgeous.
The trail was really wet though.
The trail,
like a waterfall.
Yeah, it was after it was
after some rain, so there was just water running down the trail. It was like we were hiking up a waterfall, but that made it even more special.
Sure.
The way back down, we went on a different route. It was barely marked, and it was just super green, super forested, and you're just kind of walking down like a creek bed almost, and it was like a magical fairy forest.
Yeah.
It was cool.
Well, some people say on the podcast that the hikes that were the hardest were the most memorable. Even if there's not a panorama view at the top, they're they don't really remember those easy ones, but they remember the hard ones.
Yeah, that's true. I'd agree with that.
In that case, I really remember Mount Hood.
Yeah.
One of my most memorable high points was actually something probably none of your interviewees have said, which was Mount Sunflower in Kansas.
I have not, no.
So I grew up in Western Kansas, just a couple hours away from the high point. And I grew up hearing about Mount Sunflower. And so I knew of it my entire childhood, but I had never been out there before. So together we were able to drive our van out there to Mount Sunflower, which is actually above 4,000 feet elevation, because it's rising up to the Rocky Mountains, and it's just a really special place for me because it's home, and it used to be the bottom of an ancient seabed, so there's all kinds of cool geology around that area. But really it is just an open field. There's cattle walking around. It's just a field out in the middle of nowhere in Kansas.
Yeah.
And she has,
I can see how if you've been hearing about that your whole life, the first time you see it, probably as an adult, is really memorable.
Yeah, definitely was.
Another thing out there that we didn't know existed out there were the pronghorns. We had no idea pronghorns lived in Kansas. Yeah. We were driving by and I was like, what is that? Yeah. We're like, why is it?
We could not figure out what we were seeing, and then we realized it was a pronghorn antelope, and I did not know they were in Kansas, where I grew up.
Well, oh yeah, that's right, you grew up there.
Yeah, I had never seen one before.
Nicole, what are some of your most memorable high points throughout the country? I mean, other than Mansfield.
Well, I mean, playing off what Austin said, I mean, partial to Nebraska, homeland.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I didn't realize there was a bison farm out there, and it was in the middle of a bison field, but also it's Nebraska, so it's just kind of everything that you see driving through Nebraska is just what Panorama Point is. Yeah.
It's very flat. There were a lot of sunflowers, which were very
cool.
Fields of sunflowers.
It was more sunflowery than Mount Sunflower.
Yeah.
Another one I really did like was White Butte in North Dakota.
Okay.
It was super hot. We were there on a really hot day, but it was his birthday.
Oh, it was my birthday.
It was his birthday, and we took the dogs. And the nice thing about this one is that the hike was actually shorter than everybody said, and that's normally not the case.
Oh, right.
So that was nice. But it was cool because it's just similar landscape to what we grew up with, just farmland. But then you drive out to this butte. It wasn't a hard hike, but it was hot.
Yeah, there's some good geology down at the beginning of it. You have to walk through this rancher's fence. I believe it's private land. So they actually ask you to donate just to keep the access going for Highpointers.
Yeah.
So we walked through this fence, and there's some really interesting geology down at the bottom. And then we snaked up around just like a small hill, and we came into this prairie grass, and it was almost like thigh high. And then all of a sudden our dogs disappeared because they're both mid-sized black lab dogs. They disappeared, and I was like, I hope there's no snakes in here.
You could just see Alpine's tail.
You could just see their tails above the grass.
Oh gosh.
That was a good one because that was on my 33rd birthday.
Yeah.
I got one more with birthdays, by the way. One more story.
Oh yeah, tell us.
Okay, so another one of my most memorable high points was the Mount Hood trip that I took with the three other Marine buddies of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we were there on June 3rd, and we had set up camp at 9,000 feet. This was above Timberline Lodge on
Mm-hmm.
Mount Hood. So we camped there the night prior at 9,000 feet, and then we got up at 2 in the morning, and that's when we went to the summit. Um, and once we summited, we were up on top, and I had a sign that I had made beforehand, and it said, Mount Hood Summit, but then it said "Happy Birthday, Mom" underneath it, um, because it was my mom's birthday on June 4th. So
Oh,
I got to summit Mount Hood on her birthday, and it's even more special because she lives beneath Mount Hood. She lives down in the Columbia River Gorge
oh
in
my
Oregon.
gosh. Oh, how
So
cool.
I told her I was looking down at her when I was up on top.
Yeah. Oh, I bet you love that.
She did. Yeah, it was
Good.
fantastic.
So you guys have been all around the country. What is your favorite part of the country?
Oh, we always get this question. And I think
And we're never prepared.
we're never ready for it. It's hard because every part of the country is so different, so unique, and has just something different to offer. And
Mhm.
sometimes when we're in the mountains, I'm like, oh, let's go. I wish we were in the South. Like, I miss the charm of the South. And then now that we're here, I'm like, man, I really miss the Rocky Mountains or like
Yeah.
the volcanoes up in the Pacific Northwest. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
We
But
really wanted to go to the desert when we were up in Washington. We were getting snowed on all winter, and we're like, we need to go down to Arizona and New
Mhm.
Mexico, and just go down to the desert. And we did, and we got down there, and then we're like, oh well, we missed the Spanish moss and like the good southern food.
yeah.
And so then we kept on coming over here, went east, and
Mhm.
the U.S. is truly spectacular
Yeah.
with all the different geography, but also each state has its own like microcultural differences that we've discovered traveling around the U.S. It's just it's amazing to see all the differences, whether you're on the East Coast or West Coast, and I mean we've really done our best to try to immerse ourselves in all of the different geographies and microcultures we can find here.
I agree. And like you guys, when I lived in North Carolina before I moved to Arizona. And so I was like, I cannot wait to get to the desert where there's no humidity, just sunsets forever. And now I'm like, a tree, I wouldn't mind a tree. I wouldn't mind some grass, maybe, you know. Or like in the monsoon when it rains here, it's like you don't smell the plants or the soil or anything. You just smell like wet rocks and concrete.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was like, I
I
kind of
think
miss that. And I know, we're moving out. We have to go back to North Carolina for my husband's job. And I know I'm going to miss the desert and we're along the border here. So I'm going to miss the food and all that. So
Yeah.
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 So I'm going to sprinkle in some van questions and some high pointing questions here just because like I'm so fascinated by your lifestyle. And so this is a very unique interview, obviously. And so I want to just ask all the questions that I personally have. Tell us all why you started driving around the country in a van.
Hmm. Well, so I built the van myself. This was
Oh, cool.
in the beginning of 2021. Um, I wasn't sure I wanted to do it for a long period of time, so I didn't want to invest a lot of money in it up front.
Hmm.
A lot of vans that you find on the market are very expensive, some prohibitively expensive,
I know.
and I figured I could DIY it for something more reasonable. And then I finally did it for 3 months. It wouldn't be a big deal. I could sell the van or whatever.
Hmm.
So I built the van. It took me about 5 months, working about 12 hours a day. Just really put my heart and soul into building this thing. And I did everything in the van from plumbing to electrical, carpentry. It was
Wow.
a massive project, massive undertaking. It was definitely one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Yeah.
Um, But when I finished, I had this, you know, this van, this result of all my hard work, and it was mine. And at that point, Nicole and I were together, and we decided, okay, this is the time. We
Hmm.
both have a break in our jobs, and we have nothing tying us down. Nothing was
Hmm.
tying us to Denver at the time, so we decided to go for it. And we didn't know where we were gonna go, other than the very first spot, which was our friend's house down in Mobile, Alabama. That was our that was our launching point.
Yeah.
Um, we just knew we wanted to go to the south because it was the winter, and
Yeah.
we knew we could winter down in the south. But other than that, we had no other plans. We didn't know. We talked Mexico, we
Hmm.
talked Canada, we talked driving to Alaska, Nova Scotia. We had no idea we would end up doing 43 states over the next 15 months. We had no clue at that time.
Yeah. What's funny is before all of this happened, we were both still working, but when we met, the first conversation we had was like, well, what do you want to do with your life? And it's just, we both answered with, we want to live in a van and travel
Yeah. Yeah.
for as long as we can, find a way to make it work. And it worked. We're here and we're
That's
still
so
figuring
awesome.
it
I mean, that that's like a, that's for a lot of people, you're living out their dream
out.
because a lot of people look at that lifestyle and think, well, I can't afford it. I can't leave my
Hmm.
job. Or I have the money, but I don't have the time, or things are tying me down. It's kind of the dream, to just pick up and
Hmm.
go where and when you want. I know there's a lot of people where I am in Yuma, Arizona that come during the winter with, either a camper or a van or something because the weather's so perfect here. But in the summer, they are gone
Hmm.
because it is no one wants to be here. And so you can just chase this nice weather and this adventure and stuff. And I think a lot of people are maybe a little scared to do it because there's also a lot of logistics involved. It's not just, and I'm just guessing, you can correct me,
Yes,
but I
you
don't
are
think it's
correct.
just pick up and go. There's planning, right?
A lot of planning. Yeah, I would say that for both of us, our lives, they ebbed and flowed in all these different directions, and we had all sorts of circumstances going on that maybe prior to this time prevented us from doing the van life journey.
Mhm.
It's just in that one moment when we finally came together and we both had an opening, we said, let's do it, let's go for it, and not look back. But as far as logistics go, it is dangerous at times.
Yeah.
Just by nature of being on the road constantly, there's a lot of
Mhm.
hazards you have to watch out for. Um, so there are some dangers involved with it. You need to be very careful where you camp.
Sure.
We only try to camp in trusted spots where we can see that other people had camped there previously. We try to plan out our routes well in advance, about a week or two in advance.
Mhm.
Um, and that's so we can hit all the wickets that we want to hit, but also so we have more of an idea of where we're sleeping at night.
Yeah.
Some of our most stressful moments are when we rolled into a spot and we had nowhere to sleep.
Yeah.
How does that happen? Are they full?
Well,
Sometimes, well, because we use the app iOverlander, and sometimes we'll go to a spot and it just doesn't work for our van, or
Oh,
there's
okay.
new new signs up that nobody recently had been there, and like a law changed recently in the town, or something like that. Or we get there and it's a lot sketchier than people said, and we
Sure.
don't feel comfortable staying there. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know in Tucson, I spent some time in the winter in Tucson, and there are a lot of people in their vans out there. And I think that you're not allowed to sleep in your car parked on the street, whether
correct.
it's a
Yeah.
van or whatever. And so people were renting out a space in their driveway, like on Airbnb. And
Mm, smart.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Also
and they
sketchy,
would,
but
right. But
yeah.
yeah, that happened.
We found Arizona to be a little more challenging than some of the other states.
Okay.
Certain parts of California were a bit more challenging. 'Challenging. 'Challenging. Um,
Hmm.
usually, overnight camping is banned at the county level. 'Cause, you know, there's a lot of hazards you have to watch out for. Some of our most stressful moments are when we rolled into a spot and we had nowhere to sleep. It's just in that one moment when we finally came together and we both had an opening, we said, let's do it, let's go for it, and not look back. But as far as logistics go, it is dangerous at times. You So not only would we, research where we were going, but then we'd have to also research overnight camping bans and things like that.
Oh, okay.
Um, as we
Yeah.
went. So some of the apps can definitely help guide you in the right direction. The easy way out is just to camp on Bureau of Land Management land, BLM
Mhm.
land. Typically, you can stay for 14 days up on that type of land, and it's free. Generally, it's free.
Mhm.
So out west, that's great. Out east, you can't really find that. Um, so
No.
out east, it's definitely harder to find camp spots with the van. It was especially challenging up in New England. Once you go east of Colorado, it becomes a little more challenging. What they do have out here are called WMAs. They stand for Wildlife Management Areas.
Okay.
And these are areas that the states manage for hunting purposes. But generally, you can camp on them for free. So what we do, we'll find a WMA and we'll just drive in a tiny bit, like just
Mhm.
into the driveway of it, because obviously,
Yeah,
if
you don't
there's,
want to go too far in.
we don't want to go too far, but we've had pretty good luck with that. It's to me,
Okay.
it's like the Eastern equivalent of BLM.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
But also Walmart.
Yeah,
We frequent in Walmarts out here.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of vans at Walmart, Cracker Barrel, and Planet Fitness.
yeah,
Yeah.
Lowe's, Home Depot, park and rides. We went to a
That's
lot of
right.
park and rides up in New England.
Trailheads.
Trailheads,
Trailheads a lot.
beach
Mhm.
parking lots,
Yeah.
boat ramps. I mean, you name it, we've probably slept there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen some vans in San Diego, like along a marina.
I think it's mostly to try to keep homeless out and keep it
Oh,
from looking grungy.
okay.
Um, I'm assuming because we've been to towns where there aren't any bands and there's a high homeless population. A lot of them are in like RVs
Yeah.
planted downtown.
Stationary
Like
RVs,
they're
Yeah.
not moving them and
no tires on
yeah.
them.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. They're just in a spot.
Encampments, basically.
Yeah.
I think counties see stuff like that, and that's their way of combating that and dealing with that is to just enact all out bans on anybody camping overnight, whether you're in
Sure.
an RV or a van or whatever it may be, or a car.
Mhm.
We ran into plenty of people who live in their cars. Maybe they're just like down on their luck and they live in their cars in a parking lot. Um,
Okay.
I mean, we've run into people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds. We try our
Mhm.
best to get to know them and hear their story because it's fascinating to us just to see, why are you here and what's your story?
Mhm.
We haven't met many van lifers. I mean, we talk to people on Instagram a lot, but I think we've only actually met like four different
Oh,
people slash couples, like
okay.
in person.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't really we didn't find ourselves going to like the van meetups. There's a lot of big van meetups and schoolie meetups, and they're
Schoolie, yeah, I've seen a
yeah,
schoolie
schoolie
at the
palooza.
Grand Canyon. Yeah.
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 Um, Usually we were just off doing our own thing.
Okay.
But we did meet a few van folks and we've stayed in touch with them. And when we were up in our cabin that we were in Washington, we had a couple of them come stay with us.
Oh,
Um,
fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was really cool. Played a lot of board games and sat around the campfire and everything like that.
Is
Wow.
we also don't van life the way a lot of people think van lifers van life. Like we're
Yeah, okay,
not
so explain that because I have an idea of what van life is, and I can tell you that idea is based off of, stuff I've seen on YouTube or like reels or something about this is my day in a life living in a van. And it's
Mm,
just this picturesque ideal, like, why don't you do it too? And I'm like, okay, can we get a real story?
the real story.
right. I
So
mean, I think
why don't you tell us
Sure.
the difference, the reality versus the expectations or vice
Yes.
versa?
yeah, I think for a lot of people, the point is to be out in nature and see things and travel.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people too, it's to go to the gatherings and to make friends and to join that community. And that's why those meetups just keep getting bigger and bigger. Like Schoolie Palooza happened, and then a bunch of groups from Schoolie Palooza went down to Baja, and there was a big meetup down in Baja.
Okay.
And like
That's one side of it. I'd say.
Yeah.
The community aspect.
Like they all just hang out in the desert for weeks, or they meet up in the mountains and go rock climbing for a couple weeks. Like
So
they're moving
what
as a community. Whereas
What's like the size of these meetups? Is this like a Coachella or a what's that dead man thing in the desert? What's it called?
oh yeah,
Burning
they're
Man.
getting.
Is
Burning
it
Man,
that
yeah.
size?
I wouldn't say not yet, but
Okay.
they're definitely getting larger and larger.
Yeah.
But they're also, we meet a lot of van dwellers who are just doing their own thing. They want to
Yeah.
go visit their long lost friends and family. They want to maybe take like a break from society and just be on their own, out in nature. We've met people from all the different camps, all the different ways of doing van life. But the one thing I would say is all the, fancy reels you watch online that show someone like looking out their door and there's just like this picture.
That's always how it starts.
It's like 5% of van life.
Really? Okay.
We have had those moments and we cherish those moments so much, and we'll do the photos too. We're like, oh, we finally got an opportunity.
Yeah.
I'd say like on a monthly basis, that sort of experience may happen like 5 times.
But that's the way
that.
we travel. For some people, if we decided to stay in that spot for a week, then we could have that out of our kitchen window every day. But we are, at the moment, we were of the club of, we're traveling a lot around to see friends and family and to just keep moving and keep seeing things and find a place maybe we want to live, or maybe we'll want to keep doing this for a lot longer and just kind of check states off, but just to experience it and to experience different people and cities and towns and all that. And one of the first van lifer we met on the road, we were in Florida, Pensacola, Florida, and this guy rolls up and he's got a van that has signatures all over it, and he lives in his van full time, but he works full time too. So he lives up in Massachusetts,
and he works for the VA.
And he has a dog, and he sends it to doggy daycare. But he lives out of his van, and he's building it, and he's super cool. He just he's heading down to Arizona now, but he'll just
we signed his van.
Yeah, we signed his van. His thing is to, whenever he meets new people, is to have him sign his van. And he'll just take like a couple weeks off and drive somewhere and then drive back and go back to work.
So his van is like truly his home. He works out of it. He lives in it.
But it's another way of doing van life.
Yeah,
like there's
alternative way.
There's no right way.
Okay. Well, that definitely clears up the picture that I had. It's always like some girl opening up the curtain, just like you described. And then it's like, and then I make my oatmeal and there's all of these bougie ingredients in it, and then it's like, and then I start work and she opens up a laptop, it's a blank screen, like she doesn't work. And
I consider those folks to be like weekenders.
Yeah, a lot of them are,
because most of the time in our van, at least, like we're moving every single day. We're just trying to meal prep as much as possible. Like it's nothing fancy. It's just calories and hearty food to keep us going. And there's not a whole lot of like picturesque moments like that day to day, because we're going to rest stops and we're going to like visitor centers for state parks or national parks or whatever. There's a lot of logistics in between all that maybe those reels don't account for. We have to stop and fill up gas all the time and check our tire pressure. And we have to dump our gray water, which is our sink water. And we also have, we go to the bathroom in our van, so we have to dump that and deal with that. We got to buy food. We have a small fridge in the van. So you don't have a week's worth of food, you have like 3 days worth of food. So every 3 days we're buying fresh groceries. Um, so we're constantly like stopping in all these little small towns as we go, to refill, replenish, plan, get Wi-Fi because Nicole was working while we were traveling, part time. So we had to find Wi-Fi for her. So it was challenging. There were definitely days where we would just like lay back on the bed and just lay there all day. It was just a total rest day.
Yeah.
Um,
And not to
Sure.
mention we have two not small dogs that live in the van with us.
Yeah.
And there's no floor space, and they add a whole
they had a whole new dimension to
Yeah.
van life because then you're worrying about heat and cold with the dogs.
Yeah.
And then you've got to bring their food and you've got to carry a lot more water on you.
And then, as you mentioned, you have to see if the state parks will allow dogs, like in Maine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
National parks are really hard. Although I will
That's
say
right.
Acadia is like probably the most dog friendly national park we've been to.
Really?
hmm
Super dog friendly. They're allowed on the buses. They're allowed on most
Oh my
trails. Yeah, they they became bark rangers.
I've heard of that program. That's so cute. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
a little
we
bit
have park ranger tags now.
They have tags.
Oh gosh.
Some of the national parks are very challenging with dogs. So overall, 15 months, everyone would assume we did a lot of national parks. We do have the national parks pass. We would love to do all the national parks. We ended up doing 16, which is a lot. I mean, we're
Yeah.
very
That
grateful
is,
we
yeah.
did 16. We could have done many more. It's just dogs. Sometimes with us, it was really challenging to figure out the logistics of, okay, are you going to go into the park today and then we're going to switch? Or should we
Oh,
kennel the dogs? Or like, do we have friends nearby that we can drop them off with?
yeah.
So it was challenging with the dogs.
Yeah. You mentioned you're a veteran. I have this sitting next to my computer here. It's my America the Beautiful pass
Nice.
for military. Get in
Yep.
free.
Yep. That's what we've got.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Um,
not like the price of a national park is keeping people out of it, but it's just like a nice thing to have. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we went through Texas, we got a free state parks pass. I think it's called the like Texas Parklands Passport or something like that. And then
Yeah.
for being a veteran. And then when we went through Oregon, we also got a state parks pass in Oregon. So there are some states where you don't have to be a resident. As long as you're a veteran, you can get some form of park benefit there.
That's cool. That's fun. I'll have to research that. So, have
Yeah.
your dogs been to any high points?
Yeah. We didn't count up how many they've been to, but
Hmm.
probably at least I'd say
Half of them.
half of them.
Really?
So at least probably like 12.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's pretty good.
yeah, all of the southern ones definitely, or the southeast, I should say, and I think most of the East Coast.
Yeah, I'd say they did half with us.
I think
That's cool.
the one that they couldn't do was Washington, so I went halfway with them. Went up to that camp up there and hung
Oh,
out.
sure.
While
Okay.
he hiked the rest of the way.
Okay.
Yeah, that is one thing about our high pointing journey is that we're doing this together. We live in the van together. We've got our dogs. It's our house. So we trade off sometimes when we high point. I don't know specifically like what my number of high points are versus hers. We do them together. So
Yeah.
with the restrictions we sometimes have, like Nicole, she did Driscoll Mountain in Louisiana as a high point. But together in the van, you know, we're just tallying them together in the van because for us it's about the journey together to get to these high points. It's not so much like, do I need to stand on top, you know, each one of us.
That's a good method. I mean, you guys are doing this whole journey together. So, you know, why not share in the accomplishment, whether you're helping with the dogs at the base of the mountain or standing on the top? I think that's cool.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Someone's always got to make lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into some of the not pretty parts of high pointing. Can you tell us about some of the high points that didn't go according to plan?
Well, for me, the ones that I've experienced that weren't so great was actually Rhode Island was one of them that was rough. I mean, parking the big van on the side of the highway is a little
Oh,
scary. And
yeah.
then it was just super buggy, and the high point isn't super clearly marked, or we
Okay.
just missed it. But we were just walking around like in a mosquito swarm trying to find the high point. And then we were just getting annoyed and frustrated. And as we're walking back to the van, Alpine, my dog, got out of his collar and just started running
Just took
around.
off.
He was in the highway, and
No.
he was just excited and confused and was just like running around. And then he ran over into the neighbor's yard, and it was just I think he found a ball.
Yeah.
And that's
started
how we
playing.
caught him, because he always brings a ball to me. But that was scary. And
Whoever the lady is who lives next to Jeremoth Hill in Rhode Island, she's very sweet.
she's very
kind.
nice.
She was totally understanding of our dog situation.
And then another one that was just rough was DC.
Mm.
It was just, we didn't know where to park, and there was a school right there, so we parked at the school.
Okay.
And then, but it was at pickup time, so the parking lot
All
was
the
full.
parents
And
were
then we're
there.
like, we're in this big white van that's just
Yeah.
parked corner of
You
the
never
park.
want to be that guy.
Oh,
And well, you know, that's probably not great to have at a school, but and then we're walking up the hill to the high point, and the signs there are like, "Can you find the high point?" And we're like,
You're
"No."
like,
No.
no, how about you just tell me where it is?
We couldn't find it.
The grass was super tall. They hadn't mowed in a while, and so we were literally walking around for like 20 minutes because we're like, "It's flat here. We can't find it." And it was hot. It was
Very
super hot day.
very muggy.
And we're like,
Really?
if we gotta get the dogs into like a Home Depot,
We
can
finally
cool
found it.
off. It took
Yeah, it took forever.
it took too long for us to find that.
And we don't
Yeah.
even know.
Wait.
Like, is DC even a high point? We don't know. It's District of Columbia, but we're counting it.
Could we have skipped
sure.
it?
Yeah.
But that was
That was
just
bad.
it was just annoying. Like those two were just annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's one that we definitely need to redo.
Oh yeah.
So we went from the coast, the Atlantic coast, through Virginia over into West Virginia, and we did the Maryland high point there, which was Hoy Crest, and that was a pretty good hike.
That was
We had clear skies, everything was fine. And then from Maryland, we drove south down into West Virginia, and we were gonna do Spruce Knob.
Yeah.
And when we got down into the Seneca Rocks area, which is a really popular rock climbing area, it started to get foggy. There was drizzle, and we're like, okay, well, we'll see how this goes, because we're going up, I think, to like 4,000 feet. So, we start traveling up in the van, and it just got whiteout conditions. Like, we couldn't see more than 10 or 15 feet in front of the van.
Wow.
And so, yeah, we got to the top of Spruce Knob. We saw all these signs everywhere that were like, this view is incredible. Look at the fall colors. There's a 360 panorama. And we're like, what? Didn't see anything at all on the top of Spruce Knob. And it was not only like our visibility was limited, it was kind of creepy too.
And we were there late in the day, so I mean it was already dark because we were in a cloud, but then the sun started to go down, so the drive down was terrifying.
It was
just-
treacherous.
it was dark,
Wow. Yeah.
just in the super dense fog.
That's
And
scary.
speaking
It
of-
sounds like there's a lot of confusion at these summits for you guys. Like either where is it or I can't see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a couple of them.
a few of them. Yeah. Well, sometimes we don't adequately research ahead of time, because when we're in the van moving from place to place to place, like there's just too much. You'd be inundated with all the different things you'd have to research. So
Yeah.
I'll just generally say, okay, we're going to this high point over here, and then later that day we're going to this state park, and then the next day we're going to this state park. So it's like it's just too much to research. You kind of just have to wing it sometimes. And to me, that also kind of makes the adventure. When you don't exactly know where you're going, sometimes. It can
Yeah,
definitely make
yeah. And it adds some spontaneity, I'm sure, to
for sure.
your travels. And a lot of high pointers travel to a high point specifically for that. And they'll do some touring in the area, but the main attraction is the high point. There's a lot of planning involved. But there are some other factors, as you mentioned, involved in your travels. There's also state parks, local attractions. There's just a variety of things.
Yeah, high points aren't specifically what we do in the van. They're definitely something that we'll tackle, like I said, if they're on our route. But there's so much that we'll do, whether it's like historic areas or the world's largest something or another. Like we like the weird, obscure things that
Okay.
are all on the back roads.
Yeah.
We use an app called Atlas Obscura. I don't know if
Yeah,
you've
I've heard
heard of
of that.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we definitely find quite a lot to do from Atlas Obscura, and we'll build those into our plan as well.
Are you guys members of the High Pointers Club?
Yes,
Yes.
we sure are.
As of Tuesday this week, we are members, and we plan on going to the next High Pointers convention.
Yeah.
That was
Um,
my next question. I'll see you guys there.
you read your mind, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll be there hopefully.
Yeah.
It's in
In
Helen,
Georgia.
Georgia. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
We love Helen.
we went there last year in the van. It's a really cool Bavarian town. It's touristy, but um, it's a lot of fun. We had a really good meal there, and there's a lot of German beer gardens there.
Oh,
So it's just a
fun.
really cool place.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I can't wait. I've been in Georgia, just never to that part. And I'm excited to do the High Point too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brasstown Ball. That's a
It's
really
cool.
good one. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
So, what's the next High Point?
We have plans of just doing a loop up through the Blue Ridge Mountains. So there's five
Oh,
more high points that are
yeah.
all they're kind of in a circle, and we think we can knock all five out in about a week, and then come back down here to South Carolina. So we'll just make like a week of the High Pointers convention. We'll just add on like 5 or 6 days, and we'll try to knock out those five high points.
That's going to be so nice. I love that part of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, neither of us
Yeah.
have. I don't think we've ever been to that part of the country before. So
Wow.
that's what we're eyeballing next as like the next road trip route.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
that little spot.
Yep,
Yeah, you're gonna
Appalachia.
love it. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So, do you have any stories about unexpected events that happened on high points?
Yeah, I've got one. um, so we had crossover from New York, and we were headed toward Mount Frisell. I think that's how you say it. It's in Massachusetts, and it's on the very south central side of, or sorry, it's on the southwestern side of Massachusetts. It's right where New York, Massachusetts, and Connecticut all butt up into one point.
Hmm.
Um, so while we were there in Connecticut, I was high pointing at that point, which is one of three high points that are not true summits within the state. So Connecticut's high point is actually the southwest shoulder of a mountain in Massachusetts. So when you do
Okay.
the Connecticut high point, you got to go like 3 miles in, I believe it was, and then you start to navigate alongside the shoulder of Mount Frisell, and then the Connecticut high point is just right on the side of this mountain. It's not the true summit, and so I
Interesting.
did that. Yeah, I did that, and then I kept on going because I wanted to go down to the Tri-State Point is what it's called, and that's where New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts all meet up at one point. And while I was down there at this concrete marker that shows you which state is which direction, I pulled my phone out and I was going to film it and just make a little video like, hey, I'm here at the tri-state, point. And I started turning around to the north side and I was facing the marker, so I wasn't looking into the woods behind me. And all of a sudden I hear like the loudest rattle I have ever heard in my life. And I grew up near rattlesnake, territory because I grew up in Kansas, but this one was different. It was just I could tell it was massive. So I just
Wow.
said some choice words, and then I jumped as far as I could on the other side of this concrete marker, and I looked back, and I've got it on film, and it is a massive timber rattlesnake. It's like, I mean, it had to have been about 4 or 5 feet long, and it
Wow.
was a big, big snake, and it was all coiled up like it was about to strike. Um, so it was completely quiet, up until that point. I had no idea it was there. It was completely camouflaged in the woods, and it shocked me. It startled me. I just got out of there as fast as possible. And when I was heading back, I crossed over the high point of Connecticut again, and there was a guy there, and he had a dog with him. And I warned him. I was like, I don't know what you're planning on
Yeah.
doing, but I wouldn't go that direction. And he was, really grateful because he had planned on going down to the tri-state marker. But he's like, nope, turning around. Um,
Wow. I didn't
he
know there
said
were
it's not.
rattlesnakes in Connecticut.
Yeah, yeah. He lives around there, and he said it's not often that he hears about big rattlesnakes like that on the trail. So I guess
Wow.
I just had a unique experience.
I'll say.
That Connecticut High Point overall, I thought was just it was kind of crazy. Like it was super hot. It was very, very hot. There's some rock scrambling involved. And then I was wearing a mosquito net because the bugs were so bad. The bugs were just like completely thick. And then the rattlesnake experience, and I couldn't find it. This is another one I couldn't find.
No, yeah.
Um, I
Maybe we're
guess
just bad at this.
maybe we need to do more research on the front end. Um, I remember going to the top of Mount Frizzle and going to the Massachusetts top of that mountain, but then I had a hard time like figuring out exactly where the Connecticut one was. Yeah, so when we rolled into New Hampshire, we had planned on me summiting Mount Washington, and Nicole was going to take the dogs and hike them around the base. I think she ended up doing actually more mileage than I did going up to the summit and back,
Yeah.
just hiking around down below. But once I got up to the top, uh, they have all sorts of amenities up there. There's a movie theater where you can learn about Mount Washington in the winter,
Wow.
because it's got the worst weather in the world ever
Yes, I've
recorded
heard
there.
that. Hmm.
So you can learn about that. There's all sorts of weather stations up there. There's a cafe, plenty of food. There's also an AT through hikers lodge where they can hang out and change their
Cool.
socks and get some chow. And
Yeah.
then there's also a post office, which I thought was amazing because one of the things that we did the first 10 months of our trip was send postcards out. So all the
Yeah.
different places we went, we actually ended up sending like about 140 postcards in total. So we were
Wow.
sending tons and tons of postcards. So for to get up on top of Mount Washington, it's this really unique experience. There's a post office there. I quickly bought 3 postcards, and I was like sweating all over them because I had just done the hike. And I wrote a couple of postcards and sent them out. And there's like a postmaster. There's a mailman up on top, and he stamps them right there and everything. It's really cool.
Wow.
They've got a road up to the top. It's a really historic road.
Oh, right.
It used
Okay.
to be a dirt road, and then they just recently paved the last portion of it, so you can drive up. And then there's also a cog railway, which
Hmm.
we were talking that would be a really cool experience. We said next time we go to Mount Washington, definitely want to take the cog railway to the top. It would just be, I mean, it'd be
Yeah.
a great experience to do that.
Yeah. Are dogs allowed up there?
Yeah, I mean, if you drive up, you
Yeah.
can have your dogs out.
Are
The
they allowed on the
hike.
rail?
Oh, I don't think so.
I don't remember.
I think we'd have to. I don't know. We'd have to figure that out.
Yeah.
Because even like the end from the camp up there to the summit is a really tough hike. Like any of the routes are not dog friendly at all. So that's why I
Oh, okay.
didn't go.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, there are people that have taken their dogs up, but they're like, it's probably better not to bring
Yeah.
your dogs.
You can,
Sure.
but it's not recommended there because there's a lot of water and just like really steep steps that you have to go up.
Hmm.
Um, so it would have just been a little harder on our older dog to try to do that hike.
Of course. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. So you mentioned that you've been on a lot of these high points that are along the Appalachian Trail. Have you seen any hikers along the way?
Yeah, we met a couple at Mount Greylock. These two
Cool.
guys were just they were taking a break up at the high point, and we just asked them what they were doing.
Yeah.
Uh, Talked with them for about 30 minutes
Yeah.
and uh, swapped contact info and followed them on the rest of their journey on Instagram. And
Wow.
one of them finished, got to Katahdin around the same time like we were up there. So had
Oh
we
my
been able
gosh.
to Katahdin, we probably would have like hiked with him or met him
Wow.
up there. Thing, but
We
it
were
was cool.
we were slowly paralleling the two hikers. We were in the van. They were both on foot,
Yeah.
and we met
Yeah.
them in Massachusetts, and we like just kind of came back and forth many times, almost crossed paths, I think, a time or
Yeah.
two, and then
Wow.
obviously we had it a little easier than they did, staying in the
Sure.
van. The through hiker we met at Mount Greylock in Massachusetts, his name was Joel, and his trail name was DIY.
Okay.
Because had to keep DIYing all of his gear
Yeah,
and fixing it. And
Oh, all
yeah,
right. That's cool.
I forgot that.
Oh, that's so interesting. I love how they come up with their names, or the trail gives them the name.
the trail gives
Right.
him a name.
Yeah. So a lot of my guests, they do like state high points, county high points, city high points, low points to high points. Do you guys dabble in any of that?
We did a few unique high points while we were going up the eastern coast. They're the tallest and the second tallest points on the eastern seaboard.
Okay.
So this would be anything, I guess, to us, it's like anything that's within eyesight of the Atlantic Ocean.
Hmm.
So when we were in Maine, we did Mount McGuntacook, which we hiked with the dogs, and that hike was moderately challenging. It wasn't too bad, but when we got up to the top, there's some spots where you can look out over the Maine coastline, and you can look out over Camden, Maine, which is like just this gorgeous like small town in Maine, this coastal town. So that was awesome to go up on McGuntacook. And then from McGuntacook, you can actually look out across the Maine coast and see Cadillac Mountain, which is a
Oh, yeah,
very
Acadia.
popular. Yeah,
Yeah.
Acadia. It's like
Yeah.
the tallest point in Acadia National Park. So we went from
Nice.
McGuntacook and then we drove up and went to Cadillac Mountain. We actually went up it twice, once for sunrise and then once for sunset. Which in
And
the
that's very
winter,
significant on that mountain, right? Because it's like the first thing that the sun hits in the US or something.
Yeah.
yeah, correct.
Yeah.
In the winter, that's the first sunrise in the U.S. So
Yeah, cool.
we were up there at like 4 in the morning for sunrise,
Wow.
and then we sat on the opposite side of the mountain for sunset, and we were there for like 3 hours freezing in the wind.
Yeah, it's cold.
Um,
Worth it though. It
yeah, the
was
sunset
Yeah.
was incredible.
amazing. I have some
Wow.
good memories of it.
Can you talk about some of your most memorable moments traveling in a van for the last 15 months?
Yeah. Um, well, I mean, they're all very different, but our first one was when we were in Mobile. Uh, we were there around Mardi Gras, and Mobile is where it started. So we got to experience the OG Mardi Gras. We drove the van across the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City through Times Square.
It was
Don't recommend it.
Oh my gosh.
I've never seen it, so I wanted to see it, and we were like trying to get out of town, and he's just like, "We'll just do it really fast," and it was terrifying. Yeah.
I had like 5 tickets chasing us in the mail for months after that, like for
No, really?
yeah, for like running red lights and toll booths and things. Because the van was just way too much to try to get around Times Square in New York.
Yeah.
Um, but then we drove across the country and we pretty much did it over again
Yeah.
because we then drove over the Golden Gate Bridge in the van in San
Oh, now
Francisco.
that's cool.
That was cool.
That was
That's
awesome.
That was amazing.
We parked, on the south end and got out and like hiked around it and everything. Did a lot of photos there. It was beautiful. And then we got stuck in LA rush hour traffic in the Hollywood Hills on a
That's
Friday
the
afternoon.
worst. Oh my gosh.
It's
I've
so bad.
heard. Yeah.
terrifying.
In the van, it's just everything is like it's a 7,500 pound, 20 foot long vehicle, so everything is magnified, and all your starts and stops are all just magnified. So that was an experience.
Oh man.
But going back to Maine, I think one of our favorite and like most magical moments in the van was we went wild blueberry picking. There's
Cool.
there's a land trust that just has wild blueberries growing, and anybody can go out and pick blueberries. So we were out there for like an hour, and it's just on the side of this hill where it looks out along the coast with all the islands, and you can see Mount Maguntacook, and it was just so beautiful, so cool.
It's like stuff you see in movies.
It was such a movie moment, and the blueberries were like the best. They were tiny, like tiny things, but they were so good.
We picked blueberries for like hours, and we filled all our Tupperwares with them, and then we ate them in our Greek yogurt the next week.
We
fed them to
gave to the dogs, everything. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, we meet really cool people on the road too. Just like so many different people of different walks of life. But when we were in Tombstone, Arizona, we were just walking around town, but we went back to the van for lunch, and we were sitting in the parking lot with the doors open, and this older gentleman drives up next to us in this massive truck, and he gets out, and he's all cowboyed up, and he pokes his head into the van. He goes, "What are you doing in here?" He saw the Marine license plate, and he was in the Army back when. And
he was giving me a hard time.
But then, like, after talking to him for 15 minutes, he invited us out to his property because they winter down in Cochise, Arizona, and they operate they breed Rocky Mountain horses down there, and they allow people to bring their horse trailers out, and they have full hookups so that you can camp there for as long as you want and just ride your horses out into the mountains that are like right in their backyard. It's just an hour ride out to the mountains, and it was so cool. So we went out and stayed there for a night. He's
got a yak farm too.
Oh yeah, and then in the summer he has a yak farm up in Minnesota.
And he invited us up there.
Wow.
Yeah, so
cool.
It's cool making those like local connections, and we always take them up on it. They're like, "Hey, I live over here. Do you want to come camp on our land?" We're like, "Yeah, we'll see where this goes."
Safe.
Yeah. Some people would maybe shy away from that, but we've found that we've met like the best people on the whole trip. We've met them on these random encounters.
And like some people find us on Instagram. Like we got invited to somebody's house in Texas. They reached out to us. They have the same van, and so they wanted to pick our brains. Yeah. So it was cool to swap ideas and stay with them and be in a house for a little while and clean up and relax. And then like there was some random person that reached out to Austin on Reddit of all places and invited us to stay at their horse ranch in Georgia. So that's a perk of being on social media.
Yeah.
It's another way to network and like meet people, and it's been wild.
I would say we wouldn't have met half the people that we met or encountered on the road had it not been for all, sharing everything on social media. So that definitely is a benefit, because people will see, oh, you were here, and then they'll message you and ask you a question. How is that high point? Or how is that hike? Yes. Or can you give me some gouge on this national park? And sometimes it leads to, oh, how about we just camp together?
Yeah. And another cool thing too was when we stopped and got the cabin in Washington for 3 months, we're like, this is our opportunity to invite some of the van lifers we've connected with out for like a refuge to shower and do laundry. And so we had a couple of our friends come out and stayed with us, and we played games and just chilled. And that was really cool to be on the other side of it.
We were on the hosting side of it for once.
Yeah. Well, the people that do that along the Appalachian Trail are called trail angels.
That's right.
Yeah, I guess you could
I,
be
I
like the equivalent for the van lifers.
Van Angels.
now that
Yeah.
we've done this, if I had a space where I could allow, folks who live in vans or buses or whatever, their cars, to just come and congregate, and like whether there's electrical hookups or maybe we just have like a shower and water for them. It's definitely something that we've considered, just having like a parcel of land and contributing back to the nomadic community. Because there are definitely many times where we would have, enjoyed having something like that.
Of
But
course.
there are programs that people have now, like Harvest Hosts. I don't know if you've heard of that one, but
No.
you can pay in for an annual fee, and Harvest Hosts connects RVers and travelers with like local farms and
Okay.
wineries and things like that. And in exchange for camping on their land, you're expected to like buy one of their products. So you buy a bottle of wine, and then you get the
Okay.
night for free on their land.
That's
Um,
cool.
yeah, it's a really great idea. We haven't done it ourselves, but we do have friends who do it, and they really like it.
It's good to know it's out there.
Hmm.
So speaking of social media, do you guys have any favorite outdoor adventure or van life book documentaries or podcasts that you listen to?
Yeah, I mean, aside from this one probably being our favorite, I would say
Oh, thanks.
it's definitely our new favorite.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool.
we like the Adventure Sports podcast. I
Me
believe you've
too.
referenced that. Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I
uh,
love that. Yeah.
it's great. I mean, there's like hundreds of episodes at this point.
Yeah.
I believe the guy who runs it is out of Golden, Colorado.
Yeah.
And he just interviews all sorts of like extreme athletes. He also does van dwellers. He did a whole series on his Patreon called Life Outside the Box, and so
Nice.
I ordered his Patreon. I listened to all of those because it's people who live perpendicular to society. They live unconventional lives, like going down and living in Central America, or moving into a bus with their whole family and like homeschooling their children and things like that.
Yeah.
He interviews people like that.
And he interviews people who do incredible things to the point where I think like, what is next? Like, what could someone possibly do that would top this? Or he'll interview someone that like
Right.
walked across the world, obviously on land, or they like motorcycled through all the continents. And I'm just like, what's next? Like, this is it. And then the next episode comes out and I'm like, oh my gosh, someone did that. Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's
That's a
such
great.
a good podcast. I love it, and there's such a good variety on there. But he's a super interesting guy, and I think he also works for Athletic Brewing. It's a non-alcoholic
Mm,
beer company. So
That's
oh,
cool.
not that.
yeah, and they also have a podcast too, Athletic Brewing.
Okay.
I'll have to
Hmm.
listen to it.
Well, if you like stories like that, another one we like is Armchair Explorer.
Mhm.
Okay, okay. Is that a
So
podcast?
it's a podcast. He tells the stories of people like from his perspective. He'll wrap them all up into a really well done story, and he'll explain
Cool.
what they did, whether it's like riding motorcycles all across Southeast Asia, or he did one on a man who walked the entire length of the Amazon River,
Wow.
like slogging through the river itself, like, avoiding caiman and jaguars and all this. I mean, it's wild stuff, and it sounds like it would be fictional, but it's all true. And he tells the story of these people, so it's
Wow.
very similar to the Adventure Sports podcast,
Okay.
but it's a bit more of like a storytelling format. Like he's
Yeah.
just telling the tale of these people.
That is so cool. Well, I always like to finish the podcast off by asking the guests, what are the benefits that you get on a personal level from high pointing, and then in your case, from traveling around the country?
Coming from the Midwest, I was very lucky because my grandparents, every summer, would take their grandkids on vacation and we get to drive everywhere. So I think that's
Mm.
where my wanderlust came from. Like,
Yeah.
I just have to see things and I love it. Like, I don't want to be in Nebraska. I love it, but there's not a whole lot to do. So, and it's like 8 hours from anything exciting. So,
Okay.
it's just, I don't know. It's helped, like, I don't know, broaden my mind, I guess you could say. Like,
Yeah.
you just learn a lot when you're out. And as far as high pointing, like, I feel like that's helped teach me, like, how to set goals and to achieve them, and like give you something to work towards, and like motivation for continuing. And like, I don't know, I think it's been really cool that I've been able to travel for most of my life, and now I'm learning how to do it kind of on my own and with a partner. And like, it's just been a huge learning experience. Like, I don't know how I can put it into a few words, but like,
I know.
it's so
Yeah.
it's hard. But
Yeah.
I'd say the biggest thing is like, it just kind of gives you a sense of accomplishment, and you
I agree.
feel great about yourself. You're outside, you're in nature. Life is good.
For sure.
Yeah.
For me, I didn't really grow up traveling. I did go to Canada when I was 15 by myself. That was my first like foray out into a different country. I met a friend there, but I flew there by myself as a 15-year-old. And I was like, whoa, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on out here.
Yeah.
And then growing up in Kansas in the Midwest, like she said, there's just not a lot to do. So I always had this urge, this drive to like travel and see more than the place that I grew up, even though it's home for us. There's just a lot outside of the Midwest that we wanted to see. And before van life started, I had never been to the South or really like the East Coast. I hadn't done any of New England. So just in the last year, I did 15 new states in the van, which was just, I mean, it was amazing to just knock those all off the list. And then at the same time, we're out here high pointing, which is like a mental health and a physical health check all in one. Because
I agree.
it's good to stand on top of a summit because you've accomplished it and you've crossed it off your list and you've succeeded in getting to the top, whether it's like, Mount Washington or Britton Hill down in Florida. Like it doesn't matter. Or Denali, I should say. There's some that are extremely challenging, but we've found even some of the easier high points are still there. Like it's great to check them off the list and say we've been there. And I've heard this on the podcast a bit, but it really does take you off the beaten path.
Yes.
We love to do in the van. We go down the back roads. Like if Google Maps gives us the best, most efficient route, we'll pick the other one. That's all weird and windy.
Oh, right. Yeah. The one that's like 40 minutes longer.
Yeah.
You're like, okay.
That's because we're like, well,
where's the reason that it's there?
That it exists. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they really do just get you, some of them get you out in the middle of nowhere. And
Yeah.
like I said, we always try to find like one or two cool things to do nearby. And it's just, these are places we never would have gone. There's no national park nearby. There's maybe no state park nearby. But that high point draws us to this geographic location, and then we'll make a thing out of it. We'll like camp there for 3 or 4 nights in the van, and we'll eat the regional food that they have. We'll meet the people who live there. So it's just, I mean, it's special in that way.
Yeah, we've grown a lot since we've started. I mean, how can you not? Like, without the stress of a job and all of that, like you're able to focus on yourself and dive inwards, and like we have each other to work through some stuff, and it's been amazing. And we've seen so much, met so many incredible people.